Well, hello, writers. Welcome to episode number 99 of How Do You Write? I'm your host, Rachael Herron, and I'm so thrilled you're here today. Today, we are talking to the awesome, sweet, and generous Laura Morelli. I have to say a public apology, which I also do on the show with her, but my nightmare happened in that we had a remarkable conversation. It was everything. And then a couple months after we had the conversation, she emailed me to say, when is that going live? And it had failed to be recorded. And so therefore it wasn't in my list of recordings. And in my mind, somehow when I didn't see it in my list of recordings, at some point I must have thought, oh, I posted it. And then I completely forgot. So I wasted somebody's time. And I really, really hate that I did that. So I threw myself on her mercy and said, you can hate me forever, or you could give me another chance to capture this recording and do it all over again. And she was so gracious and so generous and said, yes, she would do that. So we had another conversation, which was just as fabulous, if not more. And you get to listen to that today. You will really, really enjoy her take on writing. She is both pragmatic and obviously delighted with the writer's life, and I just love talking to her. You're going to love her too. So if you hear in my voice that it's a little bit lower, it's because last night I was a rock star. My band, Sausalito, you can find us at facebook.com/Sausalito, the band. Hopefully we'll have some video up there soon. We played our very first gig out, and this was a big deal. We have been practicing for about 6 months. And that's a long time for a band to practice. We are all in our 40s. So all of the people who actually play instruments in the band have been doing it a long time, and they're really accomplished and have been with big name bands all over the world. And they're so, so good. And I'm a good singer. And my co-singer in the band is also a really good singer. And we just have so much fun. We sing yacht rock, which is 70s smooth rock. So we're talking Seals and Croft and a little Hall & Oates, Steely Dan, some Christopher Cross, and it is just so fun. We played at this bar called Piano Fight in San Francisco, right in the Tenderloin, which was always fun. But it was great. This particular place has a couple of small theaters inside. So they were having a show that let out at 10, right about when we went on stage. Oh my God, by the way, we went on at 10. I go to bed at 9 usually. So that was rock star like. And we were hoping to keep a couple of people who filtered out from the theater and through the bar on their way out. We had a bunch of like family and friends there because it was our first gig. But the place was big and we hoped to keep a couple. You guys, we kept so many. Some of them stayed through the entire 2-hour set. The bar was the whole room, this big room was pretty full most of the night, right up until about midnight, where people just started, I could see them face planting in their drinks, and not because they had too much to drink, but it was the most fun. I had written these backup note cards, and I thought it was really, really clever. I got black note cards and white pens, and Mia and I had written our keywords, those ones that when we're practicing, if you miss that one word, like I sing magic from Olivia Newton-John Xanadu, and there's a lot of words in there. And if I don't remember to say building your dream at the first part of this verse, I won't get the rest of the verse. So I had all those, cheat sheet notes, and I stuck it in my bra. I stuck my packet of note cards in my bra when I was walking around doing makeup or something, and I lost them. And it's fine. I know these songs, but I was just so terrified that without that sitting in front of me, I would screw up, and I didn't. I just sang, and it was so fun. And I loved seeing the friendly faces of my family and loved ones out there in the crowd. And it was just something that I'll never forget. And hopefully we'll have lots more gigs. This was our first one. And now that we have some video and we have a small demo, we can go about getting lots more gigs. But this was the first one, and it's over with. And it was just nothing but exciting. I thought I was going to be really nervous, and I wasn't. I was just excited. After you practice for 6 months, there's not much more you can learn, right? We can't learn the lyrics any better. We can't learn the licks anymore. Although each song will get better as we go, but but this was as good as we could get. We didn't need to wait to be polished anymore. And I think that applies directly to writing too. When you have a book and you've written it and you've rewritten it and you've rewritten it, say 4 or 5 times, and it is as good as you can possibly get it without some outside ears, without some outside input, that's the time to let it go. Either send it to agents if you're trying to go to the traditional route, or hire an editor if you're going to go the self-publishing route. You have to know when you have reached the point of diminishing returns, and then you fly, or you crash and burn, which I've done plenty of times. But last night we didn't crash and burn, and the funny thing is that last night, we got home about 2 a.m, and I slept fitfully. I felt like I'd been drinking, but I hadn't. I actually woke up with what felt like a hangover. I had a headache, and just my body hurt, and I think it was leftover of all the adrenaline. But all night I had these dreams. I had post-event dreams. Oftentimes I have pre-event stress dreams, where everything goes wrong. But last night, after the show, I had all these dreams about everything going wrong. First and foremost, that I started drinking at the show. Really, really bad dream. Not fun. And then that everything went wrong, and that the crowd hated us, and none of the mics worked, and the saxophone player fell off the stage, and then I woke up and none of those things had happened, and it was just such a great feeling. So I took some aspirin, and I'm here today, and I'm just so happy to talk to y'all. Let's see, in terms of writing updates, I've started revising the thriller. I've got another couple weeks to do that. The editing letter is great, I think I mentioned, and super enjoyable to be working on the thriller, and to know that the major revision will be done in a couple of weeks. Woohoo! And then all I will have is things like copy edits and page proofs and stuff like that. I am going next week to Writer's Digest conference in New York. So there will be a show. I think I'll put out a Facebook Live for my show, because I will be super busy in New York. I basically have every minute accounted for. And one of the things I'm looking forward to most is meeting my new editor, Stephanie Kelly. We're going to go out for a drink after she gets off of work. And, whenever I say drinks now, I mean, she'll have a drink and I will have a Shirley Temple or something like that. So don't worry, I'm still doing good. It's pretty great. And I'm looking forward to being in New York. I've got a couple of presentations, one panel, and I just find Writer's Digest conferences, this will be my second. The first one was so great and so well run. And if you are interested in a conference, I can really recommend what they're doing with those conferences. And I am not an affiliate, but get yourself a subscription. There's something so joyful about getting something in the mail that addresses you as a writer. Otherwise, in writing, I wrote my monthly Patreon essay this month. It was on hacking sleep. I had done a lot of thinking about sleep and how much my sleep has been jacked for so many years with my old day job, and then trying to fix that. And when I write these essays, I go pretty deep into usually some scientific research, because I always like to have a point, walk to it in the essay, bring myself in, and then walk out. So I was researching again, and more deeply, how sleep works, how dreams work, what we need for our brains is X, Y, and Z. I learned some fascinating things that are in the essay. Like, did you know that at night when we sleep, our brain cells actually shrink 60%? So there's all of this room in our brain, and then what is termed the glymphatic system, so kind of like lymphatic but glymphatic system, pumps cerebral spinal fluid into your brain, and it's kind of like the janitor of your brain, and it gets rid of all the toxic buildup that can lead to things like neurological disorders and Alzheimer's. It only does that because your brain shrinks down. It has the room to kind of sweep out the detritus or detritus. I don't know how to say that. Aside, I love it when people don't know how to say a word because they've only read it, because that means they're a reader. So I learned that. I also learned something completely fascinating, and I only mention this because what if somebody listening to this has this? I learned that the thing no one has really ever believed that I have, is a thing. I love naming things. I love having names for things. I have teletype synesthesia. It makes complete sense. When I read this word, when I was doing some bit of research somewhere, I was like, oh my God, that's what I have. And I looked into it, and it is absolutely that. Ever since I learned to read at age 3, there's constantly a ticker tape kind of in the back of my mind. I'm always visualizing the words as anyone speaks. As I'm speaking right now, I see every word kind of rolling by. I'm not thinking about it. It's just always there below my in my consciousness. I can always see it, and it's something that drives me crazy in several ways. When I meet somebody, and this drives my wife crazy, I have a bad habit of interrupting them to ask how they spell their name, because I can't go on in the conversation if somebody says, this is Dan and he works at blah, blah, blah. Well, actually, Dan is a bad example, because Dan is one of the few names that is impossible to misspell. Jim is another one. But, if you're talking something like Daryl or Chris, they all have 73 different ways to spell them, and I must know the correct way. And another way it really trips me up is if someone is speaking and my brain substitutes a homonym for the word, and that homonym is spelled the wrong way in my teletype, I don't understand the sentence. It just trips me up. It's a very strange thing. There's no use for this. It's just interesting. It's a form of synesthesia that I'd never heard about, even though I wrote a whole book about synesthesia, which was Pack Up the Moon. Both the mother and the daughter have synesthesia. And synesthesia, if you don't know what that is when your brain kind of gets confused among the senses. So some people, when they hear a voice, they see a particular color, which is what my women in Pack Up the Moon did. Some people see numbers in color. Some other people see numbers when they hear music. Numbers will flow through them. It's not always about numbers. They'll hear music when they read, and it's just a confusion of the senses. That's all it is. But it's so cool. I love having a name for the very strange, weird thing that has always gone on in my head. So maybe you have it. And speaking of that Patreon, I would like to thank my new Patreon supporters. Thank you so much. Sandy Hutchins. Thank you. Joan Harris and my darling Robin Weldon. Thank you very, very much for supporting me. It means the world. It really means that you guys believe in what I'm doing and you want to support me as an artist. If you'd like to look into the levels and the things you can get from me, including an essay every month about interesting things like sleep and creativity, go to patreon.com/Rachael, Rachael. And now let's jump into the interview with the fantastic Lara Morelli, who is as patient and kind and generous as she is smart and an awesome writer. I really loved her book that we talk about on the show. And I've got a couple more of hers waiting on my shelf to be read. So thank you. Happy writing. Grab some time, claw some time out of your day tomorrow or tonight and get some of your own writing done, even if it's just 100 words, and then drop me a line and tell me how it went. I'm at Facebook, Twitter, all over the place. So hit me up. And thanks for listening, y'all. Happy writing. Well, I could not be more pleased today to welcome to the show my friend Lara Morelli. Hi, Lara.
Oh, hi, Rachel. How are you?
I'm so happy to talk to you. Let me give you a little introduction before we get into this today. Lara Morelli is a hybrid author of fiction and nonfiction. She holds a Ph.D. in art history from Yale University and has taught college students in the United States and Europe. She is the creator of the Authentic Arts guidebook series that includes Made in Italy and Made in France. She has been a columnist for National Geographic Traveler and Italy magazine and has also developed lessons for TED Ed. As a historical novelist, Lara has published the award-winning novels The Gondola Maker and The Painter's Apprentice, both set in 16th century Venice, so everybody knows how I feel about Venice. Currently, she is at work on a series of novels based on famous painters of the Italian Renaissance. In fiction, her passion is bringing the stories of art history to life. And before we get started, I know you said I didn't have to, but I'm going to mea culpa right here on the podcast. Lara and I had the most delightful conversation about 2 months ago. I think, yeah, about a month, maybe 7 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it apparently it just didn't record. And because it didn't record, it wasn't in my queue to publish. And so therefore I didn't notice when it didn't publish. And finally, sweet Laura said, do you know when that might go live? And I just had that heart-stopping, oh my God, it's gone. And really the worst part is wasting somebody's time. And I've never done that. And I knew it would happen eventually. But I'm sorry that it happened to you.
No, it's no problem. I think we all have a love-hate relationship with technology. And I love talking with you, Rachel. So it's not an inconvenience at all.
Well, luckily it was long enough ago, and my brain is kind of a sieve in many ways. So anything that you say, any story you tell, I will either pretend that it's fresh, or it will
pretend you've never heard it.
It will actually feel fresh anyway. So. Well, I'm
Good.
Just thrilled that you forgave me and that you said that you'd give me a little bit more of your time. So that means
Absolutely.
a lot to me.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about your writing process, because I'm always fascinated by people's writing process. We actually met in Chicago at the Sell More Books show summit, and we became instant friends. And I'm not sure how Venice came up so quickly, but it did, and that just cemented our friendship. And I just loved The Painter's Apprentice, which I have right here, which is
Thank you.
Gorgeous. But how do you get this writing done? Where and when and how?
That's a good question. I just got back from Venice a few days ago, and I got no writing done when I was there because I was running around like a mad woman trying to see everybody and get everything done that I wanted to do. But it was crowded, but it was fabulous. And
yeah, it's a
so
crowded
now I'm
time.
back to my little desk, and I'm a morning person. So if it's going to get done, it's got to get done in the morning. I tend to sort of alternate projects. Right now I'm working on a nonfiction project, and I tend to sort of go back and forth. I tend to always have a couple of projects going because I'm not a very fast writer, and I love the research, and I need the research for the type of writing that I do. And so sometimes when I get stuck or go down a rabbit hole, I need to shift gears. So right now I'm working on a nonfiction project before I dive back into fiction. I work in Scrivener, and I follow a kind of a weird hybrid of methodologies. My first novel, I completely pantsed, and it took years to get it done. Years. And it was weird because I'm such a analytical brain person. And I'm a big outliner, and certainly with my nonfiction, everything's very outlined. But for some reason, when I started to learn how to write fiction and, woke those muscles up that I hadn't used since I was like in first grade,
yeah.
then, it was really a strange process. And I started out pantsing. I've come around to outlining fiction though, too. And I use a hybrid of several different frameworks. I love Sean Coyne's story grid.
Girl, I have just gotten into that.
It's very complex, but it's really cool, and I'm enjoying that.
But I do love it. Yeah,
there's a lot of layers to it.
Yeah,
and I use the K.M. Weiland's method also. I think that it's kind of compatible with the story grid, and it sort of looks at plot from a different perspective. I also love Lisa Krohn's method, which is very different, I think, than the story grid or K.M. Weiland's. Lisa Krohn's method is more focused on the character.
And what was that one called? The story. Trying to remember the title of that book.
Let's see. I think it's Story Genius or something.
Story Genius. Yeah, that's
Story Genius.
Yeah.
And it asks you more character-based questions, and constantly reminding the writer, why should our reader care about this character? Why? What's the point? And I think that's a really important question. We go off on tangents sometimes, and we have to constantly remind ourselves why. Who cares? Who cares what happens to this character? What's the reason why we should care about what's happening to them right now in this story? Mm-hmm. And so I like that. I like Story Genius from that perspective. I wanted to show you this because I just picked it up this week. Have you seen Something Startling Happens?
No, but somebody else on my podcast, EJ Russell, was talking about that.
Really?
Do you
Okay.
like it?
It's really interesting. It's a screenwriting book, and I have no ambitions of being a screenwriter, but I do like it, again, from the analytical perspective of breaking down a story into 120 different beats. And I'm
Yeah.
actually working on a short story right now. I was invited to be part of a plague anthology, which I'm not sure is a compliment or not.
I think that's the height of compliments.
Awesome. So yeah, somehow I became known in the Black Death circles,
Oh
and
my gosh.
that whole Venetian connection.
Santa
But
Maria della Salute, yeah.
exactly. So I decided to try this methodology. This something startling happens to kind of frame my short story and my plague story, and it's been really fun to just try something new to see
Gosh,
how
I'm
that
I'm
structure
glad you reminded me of
works.
that. I am really struggling in the beginning of this romance that I'm writing right now because I'm so bored. There is nothing startling happening.
Right,
And so I think I'm going to pick that up and maybe help myself out because I
right.
need, I'm one of the, I don't, you seem like a junkie like I am. If there's a new structure, something out, I want to read it. Whether it's for, a lot of times I think the screenplay stuff is great.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. It makes you see things through a completely different lens, which is fun.
exactly. So do you give yourself a certain amount of time that you're at the office or?
Well, I'm always juggling a lot of different things. I have a large family and kids, and so I'm always juggling. My biggest challenge is really trying to maximize the limited time that I have at the computer. And, when you and I were in Chicago, I shared with you that I was having a really hard time with focus. I started
Yeah.
out 2018 like many people do at the beginning of the year, excited about my goals for the year and everything I wanted to get done. And by the end of February, I was really distracted and was having a hard time really focusing. And you recommended to me Cal Newport's Deep Work, which was
Yes.
such a game changer for me to read. And, it really was relevant to what I was experiencing. And so I've started this thing where when I sit down at my desk to work in the morning, I just turn the Wi-Fi off and I silence my phone. And,
It's amazing how much can get done when we
it's
just do
unbelievable.
that.
It's unbelievable, really. And so, I don't think that I'll ever go completely cold turkey on social media like Cal Newport
No,
does.
I won't either.
But just turning off the Wi-Fi and my phone for a couple hours every day has really made a huge difference in, in just getting to that flow state and getting to that point where you're actually producing words and not constantly distracted by a million things. So it's really helped me maximize the limited amount of bandwidth that I have in a day. So,
And I,
so it's been really
I think
great.
that's what it comes down to. We all have so much we can do and we can't do more, and we're all trying to. So
Yep.
anything that helps, and I really love. I'm actually going to assign that book to my students this next semester for the
Yeah.
memoir class because one of the things that new writers have the hardest time with is the focus and the flow.
Right.
So yeah, deep work,
Absolutely.
everybody. What is your biggest challenge when it comes to writing?
Well, like I said, I'm not a really fast writer, and so I really, and that combined with distraction is really tough. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got 10 novels on my computer, and two of them are published, so that
Yeah.
gives you an idea of kind of where things are. So that's really a challenge for me is sticking with one thing and finishing it. I'm trying to do better with that. But like I said, I also, though, feel that there is some value in putting things aside for a while. I hear about other independent writers who quickly produce a book and just publish it immediately. And for me, at least, that would not be something I would feel happy about because I really find that there's a lot of value in getting close to the end and then setting something aside for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, whatever it is, and then coming back and seeing it fresh. You really see oh, this is the problem with that, or oh, I forgot this really important thing, or you just see it in a new way. And I think at least my work turns out better having done that. Everyone is different with their process, but for me, putting something aside is an important step in the process.
I totally agree. I always like as much time as I can possibly have away from it. And
Right.
that is so helpful. What is your biggest joy when it comes to writing?
Oh, I just love the opportunities that we have now. I was a traditionally published author. I was writing before before there were even ebooks in my contract.
Yeah.
So it's just, we have so many choices and so many options and so many ways to be in control of our work and what we do with it now, that I just think it's an incredibly exciting time to be an author. I think I was telling you, when I go to conferences or talk to other authors over a cup of coffee, a lot of times, people share, an outlook that's very disempowered. And, I just feel like, come on, empower yourself, because there are so many resources at our disposal now to be empowered.
That we have everything. We have almost everything that we've
absolutely
ever needed.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I just think it's an awesome time to be writing and getting our work out.
I love hearing that. I get so tired of the Chicken Little, because the Chicken Little has been balking, for millennia, and
absolutely
the sky is still up there, it's just still up there, and it's still fabulous. Can you share a craft tip of any sort with our listeners?
Yeah. So, the thing that has been really great for me in my recent projects is using audio as an editorial tool. And this was kind of a big awakening for me when I produced my first fiction audiobook. And I passed off my published book to my narrator, and then got it back. And, suddenly I'm hearing my words spoken by this, young Italian man, and I was like, holy cow, did I write that? That's crazy. It just sounded so, so far away from, what was inside. And as I heard the words, I kept thinking, oh, I want to change this, or I want to change that. And I suppose I could, but I'm not going to. I'm going to leave that book.
By then you're done with that book. Yeah.
By then I was done, but it was an awakening for me, because I thought, oh, the audio needs to be part of my revision process, because I'm hearing things differently than I'm reading them on the page. When you hear something, it's different than speaking, it's different than reading. And so now what I'm doing, I'll give you an example. I'm just right now in my final revisions of a new edition of my book, Made in France. It was a traditionally published book by a New York publisher. I got my rights back, and I'm sort of repackaging it. And
that's the best of all cases right there.
So I'm excited about it. And what I'm doing is I'm sending off the manuscript to it's an illustrated book. So I'm sending the page proofs, or the manuscript, off to my designer, and she's going to incorporate images and send it back to me as this beautiful object. And then what I'm going to do when I'm proofreading it is I'm actually going to narrate the audio book. And that's going to be my proof, is the audio.
Yes.
That way, I'm sure as I'm reading out loud, that's when I'm going to catch, that this accent is missing, or that word is missing, or I could make this a little clearer, or whatever. And so that in that way, I've incorporated audio more into my editorial process, which is kind of fun.
I have always been so loath to do that, just like to give up that time that it takes, because it takes a long time. It is kind of exhausting. But I did actually put it into practice this last time, and I did exactly that for Fast Draft Your Memoir. I did the audiobook before the book came out, and it was my proof. And I can't even tell you how glad I was. And this was also nonfiction, like yours is nonfiction. And there were just these sentences that I would read out loud, and I would confuse myself. Like, what did I even mean? I'm sure I meant something. And I've looked at it 100 times since then. But in the visual test, it had passed. But in the spoken test, it didn't mean anything. So that was super helpful. Super, super helpful. I love that. Do you ever use that automated voice reader on your computer?
I do. Yes, I've done that too. The text to speech on my MacBook. I've done that as well. And sometimes I'll do that, earlier in the process. Just kind of paragraph by paragraph. I wrote a story last year it was a short story, and I circulated it to about a dozen beta readers. These are really eagle-eyed people on my mailing list. And I had the in the first sentence. In the first sentence, Rachel. And none of us saw it. Not me, not any of the other people.
We don't see it.
Nobody saw it.
That's hilarious.
And it was the automated, Samantha on my text to speech on my MacBook that caught the in the first sentence.
God bless that function. God bless that function. Yeah. I've used it for books and not in total, but I always use it for blog posts or, important newsletters, because I'm just mortified when a newsletter goes out with a typo, and it always does. There's always one in there. But, it's so good. Okay. So when you have self-doubt or dark days about writing, how do you handle that?
Oh, such a good question. For me, if I'm stuck or just feeling like, this is terrible, I will just move to a different project that's open, in my queue and work on something else. Because then, I think if you make forward progress on something, even if it's not the thing you had on your list for that day, it makes you feel better, if you can just make some progress on something, whether it's writing a blog post or working on a different book or whatever. But having said that, sometimes you need to just unplug from everything and go outside and take a walk or, do something completely different to feel better. I like to cook. That's a creative pursuit, and sometimes that has a better chance of turning out well than writing on a particular day.
And it doesn't hurt as much, if you have to throw out a meal, it's not like throwing out a week's worth of work or a year's worth of work or something like that. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. What is the best book you've read recently, and why did you love it?
Oh, well, I already mentioned Deep Work and the new book that have been reading. So those have been great.
Yeah. You already got 2 books in. That's great.
Yeah. In fiction, recently I finished Karen Maitland's book called Company of Liars, which is a book that's loosely based on Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. It's set in England in the medieval period. And she's just, her writing is really beautiful, and she has a real talent for putting you in the mind of a medieval person, which is just anybody who can put you in the mind of someone living in the past, for me, is just awesome. And she's very talented at that. The subject matter and the work is very dark. So,
I'm in.
But it's a very well written book and a fun read.
I love medieval and I love dark, so that's also going on my list. This is fantastic. And what would you like to tell us about right now? You want to tell us about your most recent novel, or?
Well, I would direct people to my website, which is just lauramorelli.com, and it's spelled Morelli. And you'll see my historical fiction there. You'll see my nonfiction, and I love to get email from people. So send me an email.
You do a really clever thing with your website too, where you have people sign up if they want to see some of the images from the book, right?
Yeah, I just decided to try this with the latest book. I think it's a good thing for historical fiction authors, because we have so much stuff that goes
Yes.
into the book or that doesn't go into the book, but it's relevant, all of the research and information about historical figures or places and things like that. So because I have a book that's set in 16th century Venice, I actually created a place on my website where, when you get to the end of the book, it sends you there, and in exchange for an email address, then you have access into this kind of secret vault of research material. And it's it's kind of like a blog roll. And it's like, click here if you want to read about, the plague outbreaks in 16th century Venice. Click here if you want to read about people of color in 16th century Venice. Click here if you want to read about painting techniques in 16th century Venice, or et cetera. So it kind of touches on a lot of the subject matter and research that went into the book and stands behind the book, but maybe didn't make it into the book, in itself. So it's kind of the fact behind the fiction, I guess. What I want to know.
Yeah. What I really loved about it was that it was absolutely organic and it did not feel gimmicky. Because when I finished the book, I saw that unique, and it was like a simple link. I'm pretty sure it was like, laramorelli.com/something easy that I could immediately go to on my phone. And I was so curious about, like, you'd already whet my appetite that I could see more of the factual stuff. It wasn't like you were saying, I'll send you a free short story. It was do you want to see what this actually looked like? Click here. And I was so happy, I'd given you my email address anyway, obviously. But as a reader who didn't know you, I could imagine I would give you my email address really willingly to be able to see that valuable stuff that you already had. It was just part of your research. You were sitting on it, not using it. And I just think that's so clever.
For me, great. As an art historian and a visual person, for me to put out a novel, I'm like, okay, and where are the pictures? Where are the slides? For me to put all my slides and my pictures and everything. And, whenever, if you're a historical fiction author and you talk to a book club or a reader, the first question is always, well, what's fact and what's fiction? That's what everybody wants to know. Like, what really did this really happen? Or did they really do that back then? Or, so I try to sort of answer some of those questions in that part of my website. Historically, a lot of historical fiction authors will have a 5 or 6 page author note, at the end of a novel where they explain all of this. But I just thought, that a website would be better, because then you can incorporate all the visual stuff that you can't really do at the end of a novel. So.
Yes. And as an author, it's just so smart. So smart. So smart. It makes me want to write historical, although I would never. I'm a terrible researcher. It would be the worst historical anything ever. Oh my goodness. So laramorelli.com, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this twice. And I swear to God, it was, this was just as interesting, if not more, as the first time. And now we've spent more time together, which I love.
Me too. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. It feels like it goes by in 2 minutes.
It really did. And I've been watching it, and it's really recording. So thanks, Lara, and happy writing to you. Thanks so much for being here again.
Same to you, Rachel. Thank you. Take care now. Bye.